Murray-Darling Basin plan came from, it began in the 1860s. We had initial water sharing plans. Then we had the Federation drought. We had the Millennium drought. Same sort of reaction. This led to Murray River Agreement. In the mid-60s, we had severe droughts, 68 drought, salinity impacts. It became obvious that if you take all the water, high proportion of water out of a river system, it's only going to be the subsurface drainage, which is bringing salt into the river that's left. So we started in the 1990s when I started getting involved with this idea of flow analysis to demonstrate what irrigation was doing, what the seasonal flow patterns, and what did they mean. 2007 we had the Water Management Act. The basin plan was developed and to have a healthy, sustainable river system with continued irrigation. It sounds like a balance, but it's not. Then we had the South Australian thing just very recently, and they made the point, the whole thing's driven by politics. And Barney Rejoice is not in the audience, is he? No. Driven by politics, he's off with his wife. And water, don't say anything, Sam. Water,
I'm thanking you.
So the science and the social licence, go back to your point, is neglected, just doesn't count. And last year, or earlier this year, we had the major fish killed. Water's undrinkable in places like Riverina. Who cares? It's mostly Aboriginals. And the blame game continues. So it comes down to saying, if we don't demonstrate that the water is necessary to run the system, we'll continue doing this. And people say, oh, that's terrible. Well, when this happened, I reckon one of the best statements came out was one of the politicians said, it's the fish's fault. I just thought that was just unbelievable. Anyway, so the other thing, we have this concept of the irrigators are allowed to only draw down water under certain conditions, moderate to high flows. However, due to insufficient surveillance, enforcement, individuals have been stealing water. Now, just recently, one person's been convicted. Great, there should be more of it. So you end up in a situation when's the law a bad law? I mean, if we have speed limits and suddenly the police aren't there, it won't work. It's the same as this. There's an incentive, a financial incentive to steal water from other people and from the environment. And I think this is we have a creative counting that's a political issue, and the politicians are scared of it. So you end up saying, what's the justification for and I'm not picking on cotton or any rice or anything like that, but say, I can make a lot of money using this water, so why the hell can't I? Because you haven't actually shown there's any benefit from the environment. I'll take this example here. First, I've got three examples. This is the Macquarie Marsh, Warren, Narromine, Dubbo, Caninda, Bowen River. There's a sort of delta system, an asymptotic river system spreads out across that part of the landscape. It's Ramsar listed. Ramsar is an international wetland recognised as being important. It's under threat from water diversion, largely to cotton, but to a range of crops. Again, I'm not sort of saying the crop's evil, I'm sort of saying some of the things that are happening are wrong. Okay, so just to get a point here, I just want to make a point here. This study's not A, B, it's a whole range of things. We look at the different, and I'm glad you can't read it, because most people wouldn't know what. They're a mosaic of species in this. This is all water coming in here and spreading asymptotic across that landscape. Some areas get lots of water, almost every year. Other areas, Kennepold, Salts Bush, don't get much water at all. It's a complex system, and that makes it harder to prove that it's going to get a benefit. So you have to target what you're doing. So let's think about what happens with no flooding. One of the key species in this one, and a lot of these other inland river systems, is the river red gum. River red gum grows well with about 1,000 millimetres of water a year. Most of these areas have between 250 to 450 millimetres a year. So something like 3/4 of the water, third to 3/4 of that water that tree's going to get to exist has to come from somewhere else. It's not coming from rainfall, it's coming from flooding or from groundwater, which is coming a bit later on. So yeah, we've got this huge deficit, and the only way this runs is by this external water. This is a classical picture of the river red gum forest up in Macquarie marshes. You notice there's multi-stem trees, not big trees like you get down further south. That's because you have a series of droughts, and so the trees don't develop a single stem. If I were forestry, I'd say, no money in that. There are other things there, but not money. This is an example. This is 2000. This had a flood in 2000. I took this photo in 2004. Trees are basically multi-stem. They come up with single stem, but you see they've almost lost all their leaves. So 4 years without a flood, you end up with severe drought. That's an area about 50 metres from that other one where they had water go through what we call a flood runner, and they're quite healthy. The point of this is that these trees, the whole system is driven by external water. One of the complaints about the work I was doing there from the cotton industry, or members of the cotton industry, was that the reason why we have that is salt. And salt's already in the Macquarie Marsh. It's got nothing to do with cotton growing. Well, I don't know. I think there's a bit of difference between that, and they're about 50 metres apart. So if we looked at what happened between, I was working out there in the early 90s, and I was really lucky because in about 2012, a student with Richard Kingsford at University of New South Wales was very interested in going back to the plots that I'd set up 20 years ago and having a look at what had happened to them. So it was a really good opportunity to look at that long-term study. Anyway, what we found to start off with is between 94 and 2003, I'd long gone to forestry, but I still had an interest in, was that something like a 61% decline in the canopy density, as well as significant increases in dead branches and epicormic growth, all of which are stress related. Some of the plots had something like 30% of the trees had died in about 8 years. And I emphasise this, there's no evidence of decline to hill due to factors other than the lack of water. It wasn't salt, and I'll show you why later on. Catherine came in, did some work, and she found that something like half the trees I'd reported as healthy in 94 were dead by 2011. So massive loss of massive damage to the ecosystem. And she, with a mathematical group at University of New South Wales, well, demonstrate there's a direct correlation between lack of water from their model and tree death. Lack of water in a 5-year cycle. So it really was important. Okay, one of the things we did, and this comes from the forestry, is you can look at different things with the trees. These are a thing called Grimes score here, and these are different components of that score. To put something, these are okay. First two are well-watered systems, so water continued. The second one was reasonably dry in 94, and it had no more water, or very little water in 94, 2004. So 10 years of very dry conditions. Essentially no different position. That's the physical structure of the tree, which is just fair enough. Crown size, maybe a slight drop. Things that did change are things like density, in effect the number of leaves that are on the trees. Every dead branches, the tree was dying back. So this, you remember that photo that showed the trees were dying. Significant difference. There's a significant difference in the epicormic growth. Epicormic growth is a stress response. If you get a fire in a lot of forests, you get this burst of growth around the central stem. It's an attempt to recover. So that's a stress indicator. So there's 3 stress indicators here, also saying that the trees were going backwards. Okay. So that was Macquarie Marsh, and so we had big change in there simply because of lack of water. And I would argue that's good evidence, the fact that it's worthwhile putting more money into it. The other sort of direct attack we have on our rivers, and this is the case with Ryder, this is again internationally recognised water. This was an area in 2006, and I was actually involved in a federal court case on this one. That's it in 96. That's it in 2003. As my mantra in the court case was, it was a wetland, now it's a wheat field. The other thing, that to me is really stupid because it's floodplain. So how many good crops are going to get up and how often it's going to be flooded and they're not going to get a crop anyway. So it's almost vandalism. You know, this fellow got about $700,000 fine. I think he should have got a few years in jail as well. He was a polite society, should we say. Okay, so let's think about what happens, going back to Warren Muirhead's challenge, what happens in these areas when you're flooded? Is there a measurable benefit? And I would argue, it depends what you mean by benefit. You have to think about, not just say, oh, it looks better, but what does it mean? Because in the world, in a capitalist system, looking good doesn't count much. It's how many dollars you can make it, or why you're prepared to spend dollars to maintain something looking good. So it comes down to the almighty dollar. So what happens when you flood an area? This is from the Macquarie Marsh, and I was very lucky to money from the Department of Water Resources, and we put down 5 metres, so 6 metre long aluminium tubes, and we had a drill that we got, and we were able to drill right down, put these in, so we were able to get neutron probe reads right down to 5 metres here. That is roughly 1,500 millimetres of water being stored in that soil. So a flood event that was on there for a couple of months increased the amount of water, and that sort of is enough to go for a couple of years for those trees. Hence, if you've got that system, it means that your trees don't need water every year. I mean, they like it. It's like us going to the pub. I'd rather go every day than every second day, but I don't need to. It's the same sort of thing, that the trees can exist for that period between them. And that's a lot of water. That's a really big store of water. Issue is whether or not the trees get to that water, but I'd suggest the fact that you go through increase up there, and then if you're doing this over time, now this is only, I didn't have another set out here, right, looking at the decrease here, but I'm suggesting that the trees are able to get down there, because we certainly had roots down there. When we were drilling, we could see roots in the soil. Okay, so we've got this thing. We're getting physically a benefit to that soil, or benefit, an increase in water to that soil. The other thing we looked at is where the trees were getting their water from. This is some stuff, this is a really interesting piece of work that Peter Thorburn did down in South Australia. I just nicked these ideas. What it looks at is the difference between healthy trees and stressed trees, and statistically significant differences. Water table depth, pretty much the same, wasn't a big difference. Groundwater salinity, quite high. So when the cotton farmers said, oh, it's all due to local salinity, there's certainly high salinity there. Percent of water, this technique allows you to differentiate from a tree whether it's getting old water, pre-atomic bomb age, because of the natural increase in radiation in the water, tritium in the water system, from water post, after the bomb age. So the difference from about 1960 on. These are getting very old water from artesian basin water flow. This one here, the healthy tree is getting 43%, the stressed tree is getting most of its water from this very old water. If we looked at water use in litres per hour for these trees, it's using a sap flow, which is a heat pulse system using the tree. Healthy tree is getting 5.3 litres an hour, or transpiring 5.3 litres an hour. Healthy tree is 3.4. And you break it down to where that's coming from, no difference in groundwater use. Both those trees were using water from groundwater. Of course, it's isotopes in. The difference was the stressed trees had hardly any water coming from the soil, whereas this one had nearly 3 times it. So putting that water onto the ground changes the spot, the location they're getting the water. And anyone who's fiddled around with salinity knows one of the things this says is the trees are working pretty darn hard if they're dragging water out of this salinity. These ones are going well because they don't have to work as hard. And the difference in the tree was like that one I showed you. This looked really stressed, this looked okay. So putting water into that ground results in a response from the soil water, and that turn leads to the response from the trees. So the conclusions from the river red gum survival in the Macquarie Marsh. River red gum survival was critically dependent on flooding. We had a 50% death rate in some of our plots when they didn't get flooded. And over half the trees were there in 1993 were dead by 2011. This death was correlated with the lack of flooding, and the healthy trees were occurred where at least there were 5 floods in the last decade of time. So, this is sort of, if you like, evidence that, hey, we're not just wasting that water by sending it through the environment, we're actually getting a response from it, an environmental response from it. Might need making any dollars though, but yeah. Okay, so the third case is in the minimal forest, just sort of over there, if you're 150k. And this experiment started, I set this up in 1993, and again, I was lucky for somebody from Charles Sturt Uni here, a guy called Robinson, came in and did some studies on those plots in 2001. So it was really great to have somebody go out and look at your old plots and see what's happening. This is a series of 12 plots, each within a flood run. In that forest, it looks fairly flat, but there are minor depressions, maybe that deep, and about a 1% grade on the side. You've got another one over 50, 60, 80 metres away. Same sort of thing to the forest. One of the arguments was, if you send water down these runners, it doesn't get to the rest of the forest, so why are you doing it and why can't you give it to us? This thing was designed to address that, see whether we were getting a response from that process. So what we had was a series of 12 plots, and I'll tell you the reason. The size varied because the distance between the runners varied, and so we said, where's the top of the little catchment here? That's the width of the plot. The plots are divided into 6 sub things. I'll show a diagram later on, but from the flood runner up this hill, it might have been a metre high, than the metre and a half from the over 80 metres or so. And one of the subplots is in the flood runner, the furthest up 80 metres away. We had weirs up and downstream of this control floods. And the idea, when we set this experiment up, we have this great idea, sitting in a lab, particularly if you're in Sydney, so, okay, what we'll do is we'll have an annual flood, then we'll have an annual summer run, and the reason we wanted that was because the annual springtime flood was more or less a natural condition. The snowy mountain melt, water come down, you know, and you'd end up flooding the forest. The annual summer one was because the rice growers wanted the water in summer, and the river was higher, so we could get actually water in there. So we looked at whether there was a difference between spring or summer flooding. And we had spring and summer, which used to be great to try that out. And we ran, the flood was about 3 to 8 weeks.
So Peter, when did your summer start?
When I got down there, probably about January.
Okay, right.
It was January. So what I tried to pick was January. It's great because I remember how warm the water was.
Yeah.
It was hot. It's good. And the other thing too is we're doing things like leaf water potential, dissolvent pressure potential from the leaves of trees. And in the springtime, we had to have a spotlight to shoot the leaves out of the trees. I didn't shoot. I should have thrown the gun. But I had a bloke who actually could shoot these bloody leaves out of the trees, and 25 metre trees. And I wasn't going to give him any cheek. Anyway, it was dark. Whereas with summer we had to light the whole thing. It was good. Anyway, meanwhile back at the ranch. Okay, plot layout. So this is a flood runner. This may be 80 metres. It might have been 50 in others, but essentially what we had was a series of trees just randomly scattered in here, and we measured sort of plant stress, plant growth in these areas, and also in this flood. This area had the flooding here. So okay, people okay with what's happening there? It's important because this flood run's down here. By the time we get out of here, maybe up there slightly over 80 metres.
Peter, which way is the water flowing in that diagram?
In this case, it'll be flowing. Actually, it doesn't matter, but it's up here. Presumably it's flowing that way. It could be flowing that way. And we had a weir stop the flow. I should point out that
subplot 6 is the driest. Subplot 6
yes,
is the driest.
Yes. I should point out we had a disaster in '93. We had the whole thing got flooded. Okay, so sorry, I'm going on. Okay, so what's the results got? We had those deep neutron probes in these down to 6 metres. We had water moving down up to 6 metres into the soil, so we're recharging water in the flood runner. Where's it going? That horizontal movement away from the edge there between plot 1 and subplot 1, plot 2, range of virtually 0 out to about 38 metres into the plot. This water's moving from here to, so it's a fair distance. And in the plot we had underlain by a shallow aquifer, we had minimal flood response. And I suggest what we had there is a groundwater dependent ecosystem just happened to be there. Now, we didn't know that when we set this up. We said, oh, this is not having a lot of sand underneath it, because it's clay, and then you hit the sand layer. That sand became saturated, so that was keeping the trees on. And but elsewhere, the flame dissolvent statistics give an increase in Riverina dissolvent pressure potential from minus 0.45 to minus 0.1. So the more positive the number, the less the stress. So we were able to pick up the fact that trees themselves, this was shooting during pre-dawn dissolvent potential, and this being my mate with the gun was really handy. I was sort of running the pressure bomb, he was shooting the leaves down. I couldn't believe it. It worked. And the impact of this xylem precipitation, because remember we said this went from 0 to 38 metres, but we had an effect out to about 22 metres on the least responsive plot at the 37.5. These they weren't 37.5, that was the edge of the plot. So we got a range, but in all the plots we did actually have a positive response from the trees, up from a minimum of 22 metres from flood runner and up to basically 40 metres from flood runner. So this is meant, even though you had a narrow strip of water going through the forest, you were getting a positive response a considerable distance away. One of the things that happened in this, and I put this in because it's very topical, I had a guy called Peter Gerke working with me. I don't know, I think he's down Denny's, probably still down there. Oh, he was at Riverina. Yeah. In the summer one, and this is what I remember it was January, we were trying to look at an integrated view on what was happening here. And he had these yellow belly fingerlings he brought over from Narrandera in his back pocket. And he said, okay, what we're going to do is sort of drop them into this cage type thing. They were sitting in the flood runner, and just see how they go. And he had, I think it was 50 of them, he didn't have 100. But he started sort of literally fishing them out and throwing them in. By the time the 50th hit the water, the first one had floated to the top dead. So this is one of the problems with summer flooding, that you have this highly anoxic environment, a high level of tannins in the water, and it's basically toxic, and a la Menindee. So I could tell them what's going to happen in Menindee before it happened, because Peter Gerke demonstrated it. That was one of the problems with the summer flooding. But summer flooding is attractive because the water's often there, and it's this reject flow because of rainfall. In Rice, suddenly you've got a lot of water sitting there when you do it. Give it to Adelaide? No, use it in the Barmah Forest. Okay, so what's our primary productivity? What did we have there? This looks at a couple of things I'll just point out. One is, this one was measuring chlorophyll A, and these were done by putting, this is Robinson's work up here. What he did was put a whole lot of logs of river red gum into the water, measure impact of the flooding on that. And what he found was, you see the difference between spring and summer. Right, it was significant. These are 2 years, the first year, second year. Consistent in both areas. What this was saying was that this, things such as the tannins in the water create a situation where your primary productivity was quite low. And similarly, if you look at the total mass, because obviously the spring flooding is better in both years, and summer flood, so the flood for total mass of this, of the algal growth on these logs. So it says that, whilst it might be attractive to send water down in summer, basically the system's designed for spring flooding. Aquatic macrophyte production, so there's what you call reeds, that sort of thing going in the water. So you think, okay, there's shallow water. So this is one was water is about that deep. Deep water, about that deep. And spring and summer for 2 years. So there's a fair bit of information in here. We'll go through it.
5 minutes, Pete.
Oh yeah, going okay. I'll just talk quickly. Anyway, the point of the story was that the summer, in terms of grams per square metre per day, was considerably lower in the spring, and in the wet system there's almost nothing growing. The summer, of course, it grew quite well, particularly with the deep water. Okay, similarly in the number of macrophytes, same sort of thing. The spring flood was better than the summer flood. And it's worked in both years there. Okay, so tree in itself, so we measured things like on the river red gum, what was happening to trees. First thing was 0, 1 or 2 floods a year, 11, 12.2, 13.3, 13.2 square centimetres per leaf, every size. So we got, we had bigger leaves from the flood. The next thing we looked at was how that worked in terms of average, same sort of thing as we moved away from the flood. So if we went near the water, it's interesting, near the water, 12.9, that statistically wasn't different, but it was a slight, possibly an increase there, but it certainly dropped out as we went from 0 to 8 to 38 metres from the water. Relative tree growth increased up to 23 metres from the water edge. So that meant that the narrow flood runner through the forest had significant benefits beyond that actual flood runner. Annual growth rate on the trees, the A and B are statistically significant, different. Interesting enough, this is slightly different from the Macquarie thing, in that the spring flood, and these are the rows, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is where the water rose once, the water, row 6 is 80 metres away. Summer flood and spring and summer flood seem to work far better for the river red gum than than say the algae growing in the water. So they weren't, the trees weren't all that worried about being flooded or not flooded. They just, in fact, they were quite happy to flood in the summer. So what sort of conclusions we came from this? No, on time, that's good. The key message to me is that almost common sense, the flooding was needed if you're going to grow this diversity of plant life and the other biological activities in the water. So the flooding is actually necessary. And we were able to statistically demonstrate that there is an environmental benefit from these flows. That's really important. If we're going to argue that we want water for the environment, the argument back is, hey, I can make money out of the water. What are you doing? You're taking my livelihood away. We can say there is some benefit from that. The flows resulting statistically increase in primary productivity. The converse is that half the healthy river red gum in 1993 were dead by 2011. The response to the flooding extend up to 38 metres from that actual runner through the middle of a forest. And the response to summer flooding depends on the species and the water depth. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. Thanks, Catherine. Now we have time for questions. John?
Peter, I've got a couple of awkward questions which I'll ask you tonight after a couple of readings.
It's got nothing to do with this, sir. You can fire away, I don't mind. This is somebody got. Okay, it was easy.
Now I remember when you were doing that, digging to dig those roots up. John and I came out and visited. Brendan George was doing the digging, I think, with the air hose. And I just thought, well, I'm glad I'm working in wheat for Tomo rather than working in red gum trees for Peter Baker. Yes, now, I did have probably a comment, like that information you've got on that summer flooding, is that known by the water agencies and SEWO because they seem to have a preference for running environmental flows to flood wetlands in the central Murray in summer, and we've had some very significant fish kills. Can you remember what year they killed all the cod, Tomo? Towards the tail end of the drought, 2009.
Crayfish running up the trees.
We had fish this long, like they would have been nearly 180, 100 kilos.
Yeah.
All along the riverbank, didn't make much news.
Because they ran at Blackwater.
They ran a Blackwater event.
Well, that's what these are in effect. You know, there was a water colour different, and I thought, okay, it's probably tannins, those sorts of things in the water, and it just killed the fish.
Yeah. So have you published that, or you know what I mean? Like, is that common knowledge?
I didn't publish it. I published some of the other stuff, but not this. I don't know. I think I probably should try and put some sort of a report together.
Bring up the
Head over
lady
to
that's
the
in
parapet.
charge.
What's that?
You should ring the lady that's in charge now.
Yeah, that's right. Richard, you've got a question?
Peter, in those areas where the red gums died, there is lack of water for many years, can you regenerate them by, is there a seed stock?
There's something like 300 million river red gum seeds per hectare produced in a flowering event. It's a massive number of flowers.
How many years are they viable for the seed?